this.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Society for Surgery of the Alimentary Tract Professional Development of the Modern Surgeon webinar. Today, we have a fantastic lineup with a very interesting mix of lectures. I am Jessica Zaman, and I'm joined today with my co-host, co-moderator, Dan Nelson. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first speaker. Dr. Jacob Greenberg will be talking to us about professional fulfillment. Dr. Greenberg attended the University of Pennsylvania for medical school. Upon graduation, he completed his general surgery residency at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. During his residency, he earned a master's degree in education from Harvard Graduate School of Education. He subsequently completed a fellowship in minimally invasive and bariatric surgery at UMass in Worcester, Massachusetts. He was then a member of the faculty at the University of Wisconsin for 10 years. During his time at the University of Wisconsin, he served as a program director for the general surgery residency, as well as a medical director for the UW Health Comprehensive Hernia Center. He was recruited to the Medical College of Georgia, where he helped create a hernia center and is serving as assistant dean for operative skills assessment. His clinical focus is on hernias and abdominal wall reconstruction, as well as benign biliary disease, bariatric surgery, and benign foregut disease. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Greenberg.
Thank you, Dr. Zaman. I hope everyone can see my slides and hear me. It's always very humbling to get introduced and asked to do something by someone who you helped train. It was just a pleasure to have you as a fellow, and I'm so proud of you and all the stuff that you're doing at Albany Medical College and here for SSAT. So thank you very much for this invitation. So Dr. Zaman asked me to speak about personal awareness and fulfillment, and really I have nothing to disclose, period, but certainly not anything that's relevant to this talk. So I think if you ask surgeons, or really even anyone, what is life all about, you'll get a huge variety of answers, but a lot of them probably look like this, right? It's about quality of life, it's about happiness or family, success, careers, vacations. I think there's no shortage of answers that you can get to this question, but the more and more I thought about this for myself, my answer has really become time. For me, life is about time because time is what we want most, but what we tend to use the worst. And as Miles Davis said, time isn't the main thing, it's the only thing. And when you see people give talks on work-life balance and sort of fulfillment in professional and personal life, like they always present it like this as a scale where when one goes up, the other goes down. But I really, again, don't think that's right. I think when you think about more as time as life's metric, it's not necessarily a scale, right? These are all part and parcel of the things that you do. So I tend to think of myself as this circle, and I can put only certain amounts of things into the circle because that's the amount of time that I have in every day. And so I fill my circle with work, family, and by family, I mean my children, because I think that's a different relationship than I have with my spouse or with your significant other, and then myself. And so to varying degrees, these four things fill up my time during the day. And when one gets really big, the others have to get small. And when you have a lot of busy stuff going at home and two things are big, it usually squeezes out the other two. And so I think the key for me has always been finding what combination of these four things makes me happy both at work and at home and in my personal and interpersonal relationships so that I'm actually doing the best job at all of them simultaneously. And for me, that probably looks a little bit something like this. Probably the majority of my time is at work. The next thing is probably with our kids, and then my time with my wife. And then I spend a little bit of time that I have left over on myself, either on a golf course playing very bad golf. I play music. I go to live concerts when they happened before COVID and now again. But that's how I sort of spend my time. So I think the key to your happiness and professional success and fulfillment when you start to think about time as life's metric is figuring out what that balance is for you. Now, if we focus that specifically on the professional work, I think that's where surgery is still undeniably the best profession in the world, right? Because we have the opportunity to do so many things as surgeons that fill our time professionally that are incredibly gratifying. First and foremost, most of us want to be clinicians, right? And I think you can be an academic surgeon or you can be a rural community surgeon. And I think we need to get away from that phrase of they're just a general surgeon. It is really hard to be a general surgeon. It takes an incredible amount of effort to achieve that. and it is incredibly satisfying life's work. And so you can be a clinician full time and have a great professional life and be incredibly fulfilled. My focus has always been on education, but that focus can be in a variety of different areas. You can focus on undergraduate medical education and become a clerkship director or a dean. You can be focused on GME and be a program or a fellowship director for general surgery or some sort of fellowship. You can focus on CME and help run hands-on courses or run training sessions for surgeons in practice. Certainly, you could be a researcher, and many of us in academic surgery do unfunded research to get promoted. But there are some incredibly talented researchers out there that get NIH funding, and their career is really much more focused on the advancement of science, whether it's basic and translational or within health services and outcomes type research. And lastly, you have opportunities to be administrators. You can lead clinical programs, lead institutions, or really lead people if that's where your passions are. So we have really this incredible sort of jigsaw puzzle of what you can fit into your career at different times to bring you that professional satisfaction. And again, we get to do that while helping people, which is really, I think, arguably the best thing about our job and why it's the best job there is. So I wanted to frame this talk around sort of a tale of two surgeons. And those two surgeons are very different people, and they have different talents. And I think when you think about having professional success and professional fulfillment, I think there are four things you need to ask yourself at any given time. And those are, what are your skills, or what is the thing that you're really good at that you can bring to a place that maybe others can't, or that you do incredibly well? What are you passionate about? So what do you love? What gets you excited when you wake up every morning to go to work and to do that thing? Like, what is the thing that sets you apart in your day-to-day excitement about your job? What does your institution want you to do, or that which the world needs? And then a little bit of what gets you paid, because at the end of the day, it's certainly important for us to be financially sound at the end of our work week. And so when you put those four things and ask those four questions and you fit them into a Venn diagram, you get different levels of where they overlap. And you can end up either finding your passion, your mission, your vocation, or your profession, but ideally you want to find that sweet spot in the middle where all four of them overlap, and that's your purpose, right? That is why you are here on earth doing that thing which you love, which you're really good at, that your institution wants, and that you get paid. And so ideally, as much time as we can spend in that zone, the better, but it's not always possible. So the two surgeons that I decided to kind of think about for this were pretty easy choices, because they're the two people that I know best, and it's myself and then my wife, whose name is Caprice Greenberg. And this is where we are now. So I am a professor of surgery at the Medical College of Georgia at Augusta University. I have an endowed chair in surgical education and a role as the Assistant Dean of Operative Skills Assessment, which is focused a lot on sort of simulation and bedside training of medical students. I also serve in our departmental role as the Director of Surgical Education and work on a variety of boards throughout surgical societies, including SAGES, the America's Hernia Society, and the Fellowship Council. My wife is the chair of our department here at the Medical College of Georgia. So she's my boss both at home and at work these days. She's the Maratz Mansberger Distinguished Chair in Surgery. She's been a past president of the Association for Academic Surgery, was the founding president for the Surgical Outcomes Club, and has been pretty much a continuously funded R01 researcher in health services research over the course of her career. So that's where we are, but that's certainly not where we started. And in fact, if we go back to where we started, my wife is 5 years older than me, so she took her first job in 2007. After completing a fellowship in surgical oncology, she had a junior faculty position at Brigham and Women's Hospital, where I was a resident. And at that time, she was really good at research. That was undeniably her skill set. And her research was really the beginnings of health services research, and so it was innovative and different. She was good at mentoring young surgeons to do that, and she was also, and is still, a very good breast surgeon. Her clinical practice is in breast surgery after completing her fellowship in surgical oncology. Now, the things that she loved were really predominantly the research. She loves thinking about a question, finding an interesting way to answer it, and then changing surgery and make surgery safer for patients. And so she loves to have impact and to mentor others to have that same type of impact. And thankfully, for her first job, that was what the Brigham wanted. They wanted her to start a research program, to run the Center for Surgery and Public Health, and to have some innovation in health services research. And in fact, that was really what worked to pay her salary. So she was paid through her clinical work in breast surgery and then through grants that she received through the NIH at that time. Now, for those 4 years, I was a PGY 3, 4, and 5 resident and MIS fellow. And that means that I was really not good at anything, right? I was still training to be maybe good at something, but it was very unclear at that time. I knew that I loved clinical work and education, but my institution didn't really need me at all other than to be like a warm body to show up and do the work. And I definitely didn't really get paid for it, right? Because I was making a resident salary. And in fact, all of that salary was being taken away from me and going right to our nanny. Because during that 4 year period, we had for a little while 2 kids under 2 years of age. So we had our first 2 children about 19 months apart. And once we added these 2 to our family, my wife's responsibilities were not only to be a surgeon, not only to be a researcher, but to essentially be a single parent, because I was basically an absentee father and was pretty much at the hospital doing resident and fellow work most of the time. So I really could not contribute much on the home front, either financially or with the division of labor. And so if you look at sort of, again, what maybe my wife's bubbles of life and time looked like at that time, they looked something like this, right? They were completely out of control. So she was way overfilling her days with both work and the care of our kids, because I couldn't really do much of anything to help. And so she decided to go back and look at what she's really good at and what she loves. And it turns out that the clinical practice of surgery was not one of the things that she was really super passionate about at that time. She was passionate about her research, about getting those grants often funded and running, and about keeping our family afloat. And so to make things work, she made the very difficult decision to stop operating. And at the time, people told her that this is academic suicide and this is a terrible decision, but she felt it was the only thing that was going to keep our family going, which thankfully was important to her. And that, again, the passion that she had was much more around the research than around the clinical work. Now, right around this time, we had the benefit of really her primarily being recruited to the University of Wisconsin to start a surgical outcomes research program there. And then when we looked at that opportunity for both of us, it was perfect. So at this point, I've now finished my fellowship. I'm just starting on the faculty, and I don't know that I'm good at clinical work. I'm a junior attending. It's my first job ever, but I at least have a skill set, right? I've done my fellowship. I've trained a lot in hernia, bariatric, and foregut surgery. And I was, I think, a reasonable surgical educator. And those were the things that I really loved. I liked administrative leadership and education, clinical work, and the practice of surgical education. And that was exactly what UW needed out of me. They needed someone to take on the hernia volume, and they needed an educator. And so I came in as an associate program director for the general surgery residency and started and developed the hernia center. Thankfully, those roles were also what got me paid. It was a eat what you kill type model of salary support. And so I really predominantly got paid for my clinical work and then got a small stipend for being having that educational role. Simultaneously, my wife got hired to do research and to build a research program and to mentor other researchers to do health services research. Those were the things that she loved. Those were exactly what got her paid, and that was exactly what the institution needed. So we had really sort of both found that central target where all 4 of those things were perfectly aligned. Additionally, we were doing this with now 2 surgeon salaries in a beautiful looking city that certainly doesn't look that way in the winter, but like a couple months of the year is great. We had a 12-minute commute to work. My wife's family was 2.5 hours away in Chicago. The institution had outstanding support for research and for academic work. It had a great primary care referral network and minimal clinical competition. So it was really sort of like this perfect spot for us. And then over the next 10 years, we had a lot of success. And I think that success came largely because of the situation, right? And then a little bit because of us, and again, finding exactly the right jobs for both of us. So during those 10 years, I went from being the associate program director to leading the fellowship program in minimally invasive surgery and then the general surgery residency program. I was the leader of the hernia center the whole time. I had opportunities to take advancing leadership roles in SAGES, the AHS, and the fellowship council. And as the program director, some of the innovative work that we were doing on entrustable professional activities now has me working with the ABS in a role of leading the best practices working group for the eventual implementation of EPAs more broadly. Caprice was the initial director of WISER, the Wisconsin Surgical Outcomes Research Program. Under her mentorship and leadership, that outcomes program generated about $20 million worth of NIH funding from faculty members. So an incredibly successful research program. During that time, she was the president of the AAS. She founded a statewide surgical collaborative for the state of Wisconsin and created the Academy for Surgical Coaching. Additionally, because things were much more controlled, she started back as being a breast surgeon again. So now that we had the ability to balance our time and things were working well, she resumed her clinical practice, and we had a third kid. So again, I think finding that unique situation where all four of those things line up can really make you much more successful, not only in your professional life, but also give you the benefit of having that additional time to be successful in your personal life as well. So, I think it's important when giving these talks, though, to recognize that it is not always sort of like rainbows and roses, right? And things aren't always perfect. And in fact, for me, that's been a little bit the case over the last year in my current job. So we were recruited to Augusta because my wife was recruited to be the chair, and I was recruited as a spouse. And so I haven't really changed. The things that I'm passionate about and good at are still the same things. I still like clinical work and resident education, but my institution really wants me to do med student simulation, which is just, it's good, right? I mean, I think it's important work. I certainly believe in my core that students need to learn, but it's not ever been something that I'm passionate about. And it makes it a little bit more difficult to wake up incredibly excited to work every day when you're doing something that you just don't find as enjoyable. Now that being said, it's only been a year, right? I think there's still a lot of time to adjust to the new institution. I am ever an optimist, so I think that there will be opportunities that will come during the next several years, and my hope is to take advantage of them. But it's not always perfect, and when it's not, I think you have to learn to be flexible and malleable to find what the opportunities are for you, and then when given them, take them so that you can continue to move forward in your career and happiness. So I think success and happiness are absolutely not mutually exclusive. I think they absolutely, in fact, go hand in hand. And the key is to, again, just work to find the right balance for you. There's tons of opportunities. Just find the thing that you're passionate about and then pursue it relentlessly. And hopefully that happens to align with what your institution wants. Know that balance of work and life and everything else will change over time, and honestly, just be ready to roll with the punches. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and this is my contact info. If anyone has any questions, I'm certainly happy to talk anytime. And look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, sir. That was a wonderful perspective and a great presentation. I want to just remind all the viewers that that the Q&A is open. So if you want to submit questions, we will be able to review those with the panelists at the conclusion of the talks. Our next guest is Dr. Stephen Wexner. I'm honored to have the opportunity to introduce him. Dr. Wexner is the director of the Digestive Disease Center and has been on staff at Cleveland Clinic, Florida since 1988. He has been the chairman of the Department of Colorectal Surgery since 1993. Dr. Wexner is a member of the Academy of Master Surgeon Educators of the American College of Surgeons and the past president of the American Society of Colon and Rectal Surgeons Research Foundation, the American Society of Colon and Rectal Surgeons, the American Board of Colorectal Surgery, and the Society of the American Gastrointestinal Endoscopic Surgeons. Dr. Wexner is the editor-in-chief of the journal Surgery and a member of 57 editorial boards and a reviewer for more than 40 additional journals. He's published more than 800 manuscripts and 270 textbook chapters, as well as an editor or co-editor of 39 textbooks or freestanding volumes. Dr. Wexner is listed amongst the top 2% of the most cited scientists in 198 scientific fields and subfields, and he ranks 34th amongst all cited surgeons with an H-index of 82, and is currently the most cited living colorectal surgeon. Dr. Wexner, it's an honor to have you here today to discuss marketing yourself for success.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very kind introduction, Daniel. And I probably have to send you a check later for giving me such a nice byline. But for now, thanks for having me. I'm greatly appreciative to be able to share the podium with so many fantastic colleagues. I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of marketing yourself for success in perhaps the non-traditional sense. And when I say that, it's, you have to think about how you're going to market yourself. What about yourself you're going to market? how are you going to do it, and to whom? Because that may change your strategy for marketing. And therefore, you have to think about, who am I? Am I training? Am I a practicing physician or surgeon? Am I a, quote unquote expert, as you just pretended that I was? Where in my career am I? What have I done already? What is it you're going to market? Yeah, I'm here and I'd like to operate. That's one stage of your career. I've been here a long time and here's my results. That's something else. Or, I'm carving out this niche and looking at new things. So, think about what you're going to be marketing. Are you marketing a procedure, your hospital, your clinic? Are you in your own practice? That'll help guide you to begin with. Then how? Do you use a traditional website? Do you use social media? If so, which one? There are many, many platforms in social media. I'm devoted more to Twitter than others, but certainly participate in all of them, except so far TikTok I've resisted. But there's a lot of different platforms out there that I can share with you. And then with whom are you trying to collaborate, or to whom are you trying to market? If it's patients, that's a certain strategy. If it's you're referring physicians because you want patients, that's a different strategy. If you're trying to collaborate with other physicians for clinical care, that may be different than research. So I'll review a few of these areas, but these are seeds for thought. So traditionally, there's the website. I've just picked on my own stuff here. So most people in this day and age have a website through their hospital, their clinic, their university, their institution, their practice in some manner. And that's a very good vehicle, because patients do tend to still search online through search engines to find people. And so, you want to have some basics, and then a lot of different drop-down menus in terms of what you can find, what do you do. We use videos. In the interest of time, I'm not going to start showing publicity videos, but you can click on the watch video, obviously, and hear some things I have to say, or you can start looking for what it is that I do by my biography, things like that. So website is pretty traditional. And more or less, it's being used to market to patients. I mean, you're not really going to attract collaborators in research this way. You're not going to necessarily find any academic advancement, but you'll find patients. And once in a while, a doctor, somebody will say, get a question, well, who do you know that does colorectal surgery in the Miami area? And somebody looks online, okay, here you go to the clinic and here's the faculty. So this is mostly for patients. Social media may be for patients, it can, but is a fantastic vehicle for building your practice through collaborating with others, because then people know who you are, they know where to find you, and they may send you patients, plus you'll collaborate and research. So how do you distinguish the practices? And there's a couple of basics. What is Facebook? It's like showing, hey, I like donuts, right? Twitter, it's real time, it's instant. YouTube, videos. LinkedIn, this is the business person's way to find things. This is how people are recruited. Both of my kids in New York are neither one is in surgery or medicine, and they're in business, private equity, and actually the younger one actually works for Facebook doing artificial intelligence algorithms and the like. And LinkedIn is how they find each other in many ways. Instagram, okay, photos, Snapchat disappears quickly, and so on. So you can decide what you want to do. Why would you bother being in social media to market yourself? Well, look at the numbers. How many people per minute are using these platforms? Okay, 1.5 million people looking at Facebook, 21 million texts sent. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, the number of things being done out there. So if you focus on a couple of them, you can connect. You can connect with other surgeons. You can connect with people. And this engagement is increasing. I started getting active around 2012. And you can see the global usage here, worldwide network is now something like 3.5 billion people, and shows no signs of slowing up whatsoever. So how do you market yourself? Well, you market, it's like Sutton's Law. You go where the money is. You go where the people are, and people are using social media. What social media platform they're using is interesting. It's a bit different for the overall public than for physicians and surgeons. So globally for everybody, Facebook is #1, followed by YouTube, WhatsApp, and I suspect TikTok is going to rise up. But that's where it is. And Twitter, interestingly, is way down here at less than 400 million people. But for physicians, it's #2 after the blog. The blog is you're putting out there some information online with your own private blog and putting information there, but it tends not to be so interactive as Twitter. So Twitter beats Facebook. Why? Probably because we're super busy. We have limited time. We just heard a great talk from Dr. Greenberg about work-life balance, and you're going to add posting in various social media platforms. And if, like him, you've got kids, and you're not going to have time to do all of this. And Twitter is quicker and easier with the character limit than creating a LinkedIn post, for example. Does it matter if you're doing research? Yeah, if you look at this study from the Society of Thoracic Surgeons 2 years ago, tweeting improves citations. There's no doubt when you tweet versus non-tweet, look at the difference in the number of citations, the altmetric score using Twitter. It's definitely a network science. It's evolving. It's a way to disseminate your work, and it's a way to connect with other people. And I'll come back to that point in a moment. You heard that I'm one of the editors-in-chief, along with Kevin Burns is the other, for Surgery Journal, Journal of the American College of Surgeons. Every journal is active now with Twitter, with different numbers of followers. And although we're not the highest number of followers, we're probably the most rapidly growing because we have an entire digital media and innovation board working at it. So some of the ways you can use Twitter to market your practice, and I've picked on a couple of different types, one of which is a personal profile, and I put Jeff Matthews up here, chief of surgery, well known to all of us, the University of Chicago, using some hashtags for things that he likes to do, things that he supports. A very, very good example of use of social media that's a broad interest, but highly professional. Colorectal disease, another journal, American College of Surgeons, 75,000 followers. Cleveland Clinic, almost 2 million followers. So you can have different profiles, but for people, and there's not time in 15 minutes to discuss how to create one of these, but they're important. LinkedIn, this is one that we've been rapidly growing with surgery with a variety of contributors, and Caitlin Hicks, one of our editors, did a video, so you can go to the journal website and Caitlin can talk about one of the initiatives, which might be a particular article. It might be a series of articles that you could then go to. I used to do posts, and this is something I think when you're on the way up, that's very good. It's kind of like Journal Club, right? If you have your own article, by all means, put it out there, right? This is from a long time ago. I picked this one. I've saved it in the archive from years ago. That I picked an article where I was just publicizing something we had written and went to talking about it. And people go to it, they comment on it, they share it, they like it. It's a way to disseminate your work or other people's work. Doximity, this is kind of like LinkedIn for healthcare professionals. It doesn't really exist in other countries the way it does here. And most doctors are registered. And of course, LinkedIn for doctors has been for many years the platform through which the ballots are distributed for the US News and World Report voting. So everybody wants to be linked to Doximity at academic institutions. They can participate in the voting process. But it's a pretty impressive platform because there's e-faxes that can become digital messages. You can use secure phone calls for patients. It's HIPAA compliant. It'll alert you for CME programs. And it adds your publications. So if you're interested in marketing to other doctors and you're in the academic side, every time you publish, you go there, your new publication is there. They are very, very efficient with adding your publications. So I put my profile up there and you can go to it, and it's very nice to see what's there. Research, separate research can be posted, and these are actually a couple of my fellows who are posting recent articles that we've done. ResearchGate, you can get engaged with this one too. But really, in the interest of the work-life balance, you shouldn't tackle them all. You should think about what do you want to do. Instagram is an interesting one, like Twitter, because it's quick and it's visual. So we started Instagram about 2 years ago, and one of my digital media and innovations board members, Delia Cortez Guerrero from Spain, manages this, and she puts articles up there, very interactive videos. Here's Scott Steele, one of our editors, talking about an article, Julio Mayol. But you don't need a journal to do this for you. You don't need a society. If you want to market yourself for success, you market what you're doing on Instagram. Just, you know, keep it professional, keep it HIPAA compliant, obviously. Very, very important. Facebook doesn't have to be about your family vacation. Facebook can be very professional. I don't put anything on my Facebook other than academic stuff, my personal choice. If you are doing personal stuff, I suggest you have a second Facebook account for personal. This one is for Surgery Journal again, and you can get high quality graphics, and it's a way to promote yourself if you do something like this with a personal Facebook platform. And then YouTube, a lot of videos out there on YouTube. You can do your own. You don't need somebody to do it for you. This is just a sampling of some of the editors and others commenting on articles, putting visual abstracts. Some of the things we have, Amira Al-Hassan, one of my board members, is multilingual, something 6 or 7 languages. Julio is based in Madrid. Market it. If you're multilingual, absolutely market that fact. That is a gift, not one that I have. You saw on the Cleveland Clinic website, my languages are limited to English. If you can, you do it. Now, I want to kind of leave this thought about marketing for success. So there's a variety of people with whom I've been connected, who I mentor, none of whom trained with me here in Florida. None, zero. These were all people who connected with me through social media, and to some degree, some of them through personal relationships at meetings, where I was then able to collaborate and help them develop their careers. And I must say that as a mentor, this is a great way to meet mentees outside of your immediate scope. So if you're on the other side and you want to market yourself and you want somebody to work with you, you no longer need them in your institution or in your community. If you're engaged in social media, you can reach out to people and find them. So Sameh Hani is from Egypt, from Mansoura, Egypt. He's actually now doing a sabbatical with me. Paula Ferrata, everybody knows, from the American College of Surgeons and trauma world. But we collaborate a lot on things remotely. Manish Chand at University College London. I mentioned already Amira Al-Hassan from Kuwait. Antonio Quesito Marula in Canada, Luis Cabrera from Cali, Colombia, Delia Cortez Guerrero, Manish Chand, Venki Munikrishnan from Chennai, India. I mean, all over the world, no in-person, in-institution surgical interaction ever, and yet collaborating on manuscripts, collaborating on research, speaking at each other's meetings. I think social media will tremendously help you market at whatever stage. And even at my stage, I put my Twitter handle on my slides because I think it's quite helpful. So pick your platform, and maybe during the discussion, we can go more into which platform to use for whom. But I think marketing in 2022 has never been easier now that we have all of these options for marketing, and folks like me who are happy to support people who want to see their careers go up. So thank you for the opportunity very much, Dr. Zaman. I'm happy to be here with you today.
Thank you very much for that fantastic talk. I'm going to have to look at my Twitter account now and figure out how I can market myself better. Our next speaker, unfortunately, is not able to join us in real time. She had an operation that unfortunately did not finish appropriately in time. But she is, I have a recording that will pull up. Our speaker is Dr. Deborah Keller. She completed her surgical residency at Temple University Hospital. After residency, she performed a dedicated colorectal research fellowship in Cleveland with Dr. Connor Delaney. Dr. Keller completed her clinical colorectal fellowship in advanced MAS training in Cleveland Clinic, Dallas, and Houston. Following training, she joined the Division of Colorectal Surgery at Columbia University Medical Center. During that time, she developed a thriving clinical practice focusing on minimally invasive approaches for rectal cancer, inflammatory bowel disease, and reoperative pelvic surgery. She also established a successful outcomes research group that was internationally represented, and at that same time commenced a PhD in London on imaging biomarkers. She is currently a clinical associate professor and surgical scientist at UC Davis, and she is specializing in rectal cancer and earned NAPRC certification in a partnership with an optics lab focusing on intraoperative GI imaging. She is very prolific and is involved in multiple surgical societies and editorial boards. And she says that mentorship is her key to success, and mentoring others gives her the greatest reward in surgery. And this is her talk is based on that.
Thank you so much for the ability to speak today. When we think about mentorship in surgical education, we really go back to thinking of William Halsted. He was the father of training and created the triple threat of the researcher, clinician, and teacher. Now, his mentorship was actually an apprenticeship where he decided if and when a trainee was ready for independent practice. But several variables have collided: technical innovation, decreased time in the hospital, and increased demands for patient and provider safety that have forced a change in surgical training. And the academic surgical model now is more like swimming with sharks. This was an essay written for sponge divers back in the 1700s, but it has much broader implications, and these steps really do parallel what we go through in surgery. And of note is Rule 2 of do not bleed. Those who can't learn to control their bleeding should not attempt to swim with sharks. The current model for surgery is ripe with administrative tasks of little value that take away our joy, and penalties for not having a likeness or attitude of the traditional models of surgery. Our lives have competing interests on time, and work-life balance is just a fallacy. We can have it all, just not at the same time, and we have to constantly reprioritize. There are barriers to advancement, both externally from the organization and within ourselves. Competing demands that are a barrier to developing academic success. And these forces can result in high rates of depression, exhaustion, dissatisfaction, and burnout. A survey of all general surgery trainees from all training programs in 2014 with an 80% response rate showed that 69% of trainees had burnout. More than 40% would consider dropping out and reported they wouldn't choose to enroll again. And women were at a higher risk of burnout than men. They concluded that the high rates of burnout were concerning, given the potential impact on the quality of patient care. But this issue isn't just confined to trainees. It's rampant in practicing surgeons. This is a 10-plus-year-old survey from the American College of Surgeons that showed that 40% of surgeons were considered burned out, 30% screened positive for depression, and nearly 30% had high rates of depersonalization. These are scary results from a time before we even talked about burnout. And it's not an issue isolated to the US. A recent article in the Royal College of Surgeons Bulletin highlighted the same issues at the same rates in consultant surgeons. Why does it matter? Because it's an epidemic that affects patient safety, the quality of care we deliver, and patient satisfaction. Surgeons that are burned out have 2 times the risk of being involved in a patient safety incident. They're 3 times more likely to receive low patient satisfaction scores and 4 times more likely to leave surgery. But support can proactively help prevent this. Mentorship was originally introduced in Homer's Odyssey, where the character of Mentor guided the development of Telemachus, Odysseus' son, while he was away. The name Mentor was adopted to refer to an individual who imparts wisdom to and shares knowledge with a less experienced associate. A mentor is now a developer of talent, someone who helps define goals and shares social and professional values during a process called mentoring, where there's informal transmission of knowledge, social capital, and support for a mentee's development. Mentorship is a key element of career satisfaction and retention in surgery and has an important influence over guidance, productivity, and personal development. It helps career development with professional growth and fostering a career, giving a structured process for development, facilitated opportunities for exposure and visibility, where for lower ranks, it gives general development and higher ranks, strategic career path planning. Successful mentorship also gives personal development, assigning role models, help promoting psychological empowerment, assertiveness, self-efficacy, self-esteem, and confidence. These are positive traits. It improves problem solving and clinical skills and gives a safe space to reflect on core values with goals. Successful mentoring can also help your academic craftsmanship and job satisfaction, giving more meaningful roles, tenure and retention, as well as impacting promotion and anxiety containment, so you can help navigate the new local environment of academic surgery. There's different models for mentorship. The traditional is a one-to-one model, where you can have one mentor or many mentors, but the relationship happens in solo, as well as group models like launch teams, which are used in new faculty, where several mentors with diverse skill sets and diverse backgrounds perform intentional learning for the mentee, and boost teams that are used in more senior faculty, such as the transition from assistant to associate professor, where they have to work on new goal setting and trajectory mapping so they can do benevolent leadership themselves. Steven Spielberg was right on when he said that successful mentors have a delicate balance of mentoring someone as it's creating them in their own image, but giving them the opportunity to create themselves. A successful mentor has to have precision phenotyping, where they can get their mentee where they want to go, not where the mentor went, and recognizing the unique talents and aspirations of the mentee. It's important that a mentor doesn't commit mentorship malpractice, which there's several defined types of. All have important implications that can damage the mentee and the relationship. And for the mentee in mentorship malpractice, they have to also recognize it, their role, and ensure that they're not complicit, setting boundaries, communicating needs, and exiting the relationship when all else fails. Successful mentees have to be result-centered, internally directed, but externally open to critique, and focused on the success not only of themselves, but the whole organization. There are also common mentee missteps, defined types of backstabbing, overcommitting, ghosts, lone wolves, and doormats that can also have internal effects that can damage the relationship and progress. There's 4 golden rules that can help with effective mentorship and menteeship. It's like selecting the right mentor, being respectful of the mentor's time and managing it wisely, communicating efficiently and effectively, and being the driving force that engages, energizes, and collaborates with your mentor. But the most important advice on being an ideal mentee is under-promising and over-delivering. Ineffective mentorship has an impact. Its difficulty retaining junior surgeons can be seen, disillusionment with academic medicine, reduced productivity, decreased grant funding, limited career development, and overall decreased job satisfaction. Knowing all the benefits for mentoring, why don't we have mentors? Often stated is that there's no official program, established training for mentors or mentees, issues with the pairing, especially when they're assigned. It's unclear how a mentee can contact a desired mentor. The effort is unrecognized as it takes up a lot of time and effort and it's unpaid. And a stigmata that those seeking support are weak. None of these are true. And while mentorship is important, it's not enough. Sponsorship is also needed. Sponsorship is active support by a senior staff member who has a significant influence on the decision-making process of an organization. They have proteges, not mentees, and they use the power to advocate, protect, and fight for the career advancement of their protege. To do sponsorship, it's identifying a high potential protege, advancing their career by nominating them for opportunities, introducing them into important career networks, actively driving and shaping their career vision, being vested in their upward mobility, and championing them visibly. It differs from mentorship in that it's a one-to-one model, episodic and sponsored on specific opportunities. Effective sponsors are well-established and well-connected, and effective proteges have to rise to the task and remain loyal at all costs. What's really the difference between sponsors and mentors? Mentors can sit at any level in the hierarchy. They provide emotional support, feedback, and other advice. They serve as role models and focus on the mentee's personal and professional development, but just guiding them. While sponsors have a more active role. They're senior with influence. They ensure their people are considered for promising opportunities, and they fight to get their people promoted. Sponsorship matters, and it matters more for women who are often over-mentored and under-sponsored. This can have an impact on pay, assigning high-profile assignments, improving advancement, and retention. It's something that we should be aware of. And there are overlaps, although each is a key concept, like having a key professional relationship, benefits of participation, multiple of each, having a mentor that can ultimately serve as a sponsor, and having the relationship built on trust, respect, and loyalty. But they are distinct, and each surgeon should develop a network of both mentors and sponsors. So I'm going to confuse you even more by throwing another term in, coaching. Athletes use coaches to improve their performance, especially the most elite athletes. Coaches help identify areas of improvement, followed by deliberate practice using customized exercises with repetition and immediate feedback. It's seldom used in healthcare, and this deficiency leads many surgeons to plateau in a state of proficiency. Those skills could be developed to achieve elite performance. And video is the best way to do it. Average players want to be left alone, good players want to be coached, and great players want to be told the truth. It's the same thing with great surgeons. Video tells the truth. Video-based coaching is a structured approach to peer coaching that's based on a regular video-based review of operative performance. It matches an individual surgeon with a surgical colleague who's been trained in the core principles of coaching. The pair uses a video recorded operation by the participating surgeon to examine performance, including technical, cognitive, and interpersonal skills. And then during a series of coaching sessions, they identify individual performance goals, evaluate performance, and design an action plan to advance those goals. Video-based coaching can be done by uploading videos directly from the OR to a secure cloud. Again, technical and non-technical skills are evaluated. Gives you the ability to edit and annotate videos, segment by key steps, and look at your workflow analytics. And from this, you can create an operative timeline. This will help facilitate any formal coaching model and could have important implications for privileging and credentialing as we move forward. From video-based coaching, you can measure success using a scorecard. They can look at the analytics by step and by procedure. You can use validated performance metrics like years and goals for robotic or laparoscopic surgery, respectively. Look at yourself as an individual over time, or look at your department or your peer group. Compare your phase durations, your workflow efficacy, and essentially build an operative skills CV. You can do this yourself, or you can use several commercial programs that are available. There are set collaboratives that have been doing surgical coaching, like University of Michigan, areas in Boston and Wisconsin. And SSAT and other societies are trying to create programs. Data is accumulating on the benefits, the feasibility, key steps, and coaches' perspectives have been reported, as well as the benefits in bariatric surgery. and the Journal of GI Surgery has just published the white paper from the SSAT on development of video-based coaching. But the most important part of successful coaching is the relationship between the coach and the surgeon. To have successful coaching, there are important characteristics for a productive relationship, including the mutual trust, the established rapport, compatibility with communication, and mutual commitment, and facilitators of success that you have to keep in mind in order to succeed as a pair. In conclusion, changes in the surgical environment and pressures externally have caused us to move towards mentorship, sponsorship, and coaching in order to be successful. It's necessary to create a network of mentors and sponsors to help realize and guide success in our personal and professional goals, as well as participating in surgical coaching for operative skills performance improvement. You need both mentors and sponsors, as well as coaches, to succeed, and multiple to cover different timeframes, different skill sets, and circumstances, as well as all facets of your life. These are my mentors, sponsors, and coaches that I just want to thank, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, we'll get to our next guest. So it's an absolute pleasure and privilege to introduce Dr. John H. Stewart IV. Dr. Stewart received his medical degree from Howard University and completed his general surgery residency at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. He completed fellowships in surgical oncology, tumor immunology, and molecular oncology at the National Cancer Institute. He's the founding director of the Louisiana State University Louisiana Children's Medical Center Cancer Center. He also holds the rank of professor of surgery at Louisiana State University New Orleans School of Medicine. Dr. Stewart serves as director of the American Board of Surgery, the chair of the American College of Surgeons Advisory Council for General Surgery, and a member of the Halstead Society Board of Directors. Dr. Stewart has established a national profile in education, scientific research, and cancer care delivery to underserved populations. His clinical interests are in general surgical oncology, focusing on melanoma, tumor immunotherapy, and peritoneal surface malignancies, and he has published over 100 manuscripts in peer-reviewed journals. Dr. Stewart, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you so much for having me. I'm assuming everyone can see my screen.
Yes, sir. It looks good and you sound good.
Great, thank you. And so I've been given the honor to speak about cultural competency. And I will tell you that the time is now. And so over the course of this presentation, we will provide data on why cultural competency is essential, not just in the field of surgery, but also for taking care of patients. And so the American Psychology Association defined cultural competence as the ability to understand and appreciate differences in cultures or belief systems. Now, the key drivers for the need of cultural competency at this point are pretty holistic in that we are beginning to understand that America is changing, okay? So we have the growth of immigrant populations. America has not changed with respect to some of its attitudes towards sexual gender minority populations that are manifested as stigma and discrimination. But then there's also ongoing recognition of systemic racism that has persisted throughout the history of our country. So what are some of the inherent barriers to cultural competency? So those barriers are shown here that include the lack of diversity in healthcare leadership and workforce, the barrier of having systems of poor care that are not designed to meet the needs of diverse patient populations, and implicit bias at the provider level. So let's talk about the lack of diversity in healthcare leadership and workforce. I think that the data that I'm about to show are pretty well recognized. And so those of us who have paid any attention to the surgical workforce will see that women are underrepresented in leadership as well as underrepresented minorities. And so if we look at these data from Paris Butler, and he provided these to me in a personal communication, we'll see that, sorry, here we've got a little slide drift, okay. We'll see that with respect to general surgery residents, 38.3% are women, only 9.8% are underrepresented minorities. In general surgery faculty, only 25% of general surgery faculty are women and 6.5% are underrepresented minorities. The department chairs have been in flux since the slide was created, but we'll see that roughly 13% of women were department chairs were held by women, and only about 7.5% were underrepresented minorities. And there are no editors-in-chiefs of the top 20 impact American surgery journals. And there is one woman, Dr. Melina Kibbe, who heads JAMA Surgery. The second, so when we see that we have these disparities in representation in surgery faculty numbers, in surgical leadership, surgical thought leadership, we then begin to see that this infiltrates down to differences in clinical trial leadership. And so Lisa Newman published this finding in 2004, and we've had a number of subsequent papers examining this issue, in which she looked at American College of Surgeons Oncology Group, which is now part of the Alliance, and found that the preponderance of clinical investigators in surgical trials of breast, lung, and colorectal cancer were Caucasian men. We then saw that only 2% of those investigators were African American, which is similar to the proportion of Hispanic American surgeons. Now, what we need to understand is that this diversity that needs to occur in clinical research actually not only catalyzes catchment relative scientific inquiry, but it also helps us understand how we tackle some of the population-specific health issues, such as structural violence in medicine that are experienced by vulnerable populations. And so Dr. Newman concluded that potentially the most effective approach to provider and practice level barriers is addressing the clinical trials professional pipeline. Secondly, we see that systems of care are poorly designed to meet the needs of diverse patient populations. And so shown here are data with respect to 30-day mortality. So Kaprisky Greenberg, who Jacob called his boss, first looked at this data in 2008, and she and her group saw that there were actually disparities in surgical oncology outcomes over a very short time period. However, Lam et al. Republished in JAMA Network Open 2 years ago that if we look at the period between 2007, 2008 to 2015, 2016, we see that we did have a slight reduction in 30-day mortality for surgical oncology operations. What we did notice, however, is that there's actually a widening in the gap between 30-day mortality for African American patients, which is higher than that seen in Caucasian patients. These differences exist beyond general surgery. If we look at our cardiac surgery mortality, we see that after no adjustments, there's an odds ratio of 1.34 for higher mortality in cardiac surgery. And then when they actually made adjustments, they saw that 53% of the difference in cardiac surgery mortality can be attributed to disparities. And so another inherent barrier to cultural competence is implicit bias at the provider level. So I will say that we've used implicit bias kind of as a buzzword for the past couple of years, but if you talk to many professionals in the field, they will say that it is actually explicit bias. And so when we think about this bias at the provider level, it extends across a number of characteristics, right? So, first of mind is race, but we also need to think about gender, perceptions of education, religion, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, et cetera. So it's really hard to quantify inherent or implicit bias. And so we rely on qualitative data to evaluate this. And so I think that one really good way to evaluate this is to evaluate implicit bias in the context of clinical trials. And so Naranjan et al. Published in Cancer in 2002, qualitative data in which they actually did interviews with principal investigators for clinical trials, research coordinators, research nurses around their perceptions of enrolling patients, minority patients in clinical trials. And so, if we think about implicit bias, we first have to ask, what are they thinking, right? And then once we understand what they're thinking, then we have to understand what they're saying. Okay, so shown here is a quote from a principal investigator of a clinical trial, and I'll read it for emphasis. Is that African Americans, I think, have less knowledge. We take a little bit more time to explain to African Americans. I think if they have more questions because we know they are not more knowledgeable, so I think it takes time. They have a lot of questions. This is from someone who is charged with enrolling patients on clinical trials. Clear qualitative data. So when we think about cultural competency, we also not only have to understand what they're thinking, we also need to understand what they're saying, but we also need to understand what they are doing. And so Chris Lathan from the Dana-Farber Cancer Center published almost 15 years ago, trying to understand implicit bias as it relates to comorbidity and subsequent delivery of lung cancer surgery. And so Dr. Lathan and his group had two important findings that were published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. And so I guess the biggest finding is that if you had African-American patients with two or more comorbidities, they were an odds ratio of 0.04 to undergo lung cancer surgery than African-American patients with fewer comorbidities. Now, within the same cohort, there was no difference in the delivery of lung cancer operations to white patients with two or more comorbidities relative to their cohorts with fewer comorbidities. So how do we address this? How do we address these issues around implicit bias, around the uneven delivery of care, around the lack of leadership? Okay. I would say that there are three important components to this. First is to build a culture around justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The second is to demand institutional assessment and accountability. For too long, we've done institutional assessments and not done anything with the data. And then thirdly, we need to develop adaptations to service delivery reflecting an understanding of cultural diversity. So building a culture around JEDI, all right? So I think it's important for us to understand the definitions of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, so that as we begin to develop new paradigms for addressing these issues, we understand what our endpoints are, okay? So with justice, you actually dismantle barriers to opportunities and eliminate systemic disadvantages. Equity ensures that everyone has access to the same opportunities and resources. Diversity encompasses the differences among us that are often based on experience. And inclusion means fostering respect and team spirit in workplace and embracing and amplifying the multicultural perspectives and voices. I'd like to call Dr. L.D. Britt says, diversity is actually getting invited to the dance, but inclusion often includes getting asked to dance. So again, those are very important concepts for us to understand as we begin to demand institutional assessment and accountability. And so institutional assessment and accountability requires us to, one, review existing documentation. Many times there have been cultural assessments done at institutions that are put in a binder and put on the shelf, okay? So we have to go back and look at that documentation to understand what our policies and procedures are. Secondly, you have to get a fresh view and you have to interview key individual informants. Now, a lot of work that I have done of late involves having community involvement and engagement in the activities of medical centers to understand their perceptions of the care that is delivered, but also the way that they are moved or not moved through the system. And this typically seems to be very, very, very informative. And once you do the key individual interviews, it's important to have focus groups in which you go to the community and you really talk about, A, you get information, but B, you also begin to have real dialogue around how you can address some of those issues. And then also undertaking an organization-wide survey that also includes employees. Finally, we have to take those data and develop adaptations to care delivery that reflect an understanding of cultural diversity. And so this is a framework that has been accepted by many in the business world. And the first thing is to promote culturally adaptive interventions and advocacy within across systems. The use of patient navigators can help promote these interventions. And in fact, the oncology care model by the CMS actually demonstrated that navigation that provides culturally adaptive care for patients that face structural racism in the medical system actually helps even outcomes for cancer care. Secondly, we have to recognize and understand the role of language and communication through sensitive engagement. This, I think, is really learned by experience and learned by feedback, because there are different ways of expressing oneself that can help a provider understand, A, whether or not a patient truly embraces what you're telling them to do, but secondly, allows you to have conversations down the road around completion of your treatment plan and having them serve with self-agency. Fourth is to be aware of the social and physical environment of the lives of those seeking care. It is well recognized now that stress, the presence of food deserts, trauma, all impact a patient's ability to receive care. Now, more recent data suggests that the epigenomic imprinting that occurs in this context also has significant implications with respect to health and well-being. Finally, we have to conduct culturally appropriate and informed research, teaching, and clinical care. So again, ask your students if they understand how we can better, or if they can help you better understand how we can create a more inclusive, culturally aligned environment that promotes teaching, that promotes learning, and ultimately supports research. So in conclusion, 2 points. Number one is that we have to break down the inherent barrier, and these barriers actually require bold steps in rethinking the surgical workforce. And secondly, we have to change healthcare delivery to allow us to have an understanding of the present state that informs our future state. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to our panel discussion.
Thank you for a very enlightening talk. Our final speaker is Dr. Taylor Rial. Dr. Rial attended Johns Hopkins University for medical school, where she stayed on for surgical residency and subsequently fellowship in pancreaticobiliary surgery. She also obtained her PhD from the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston Clinical Science. Dr. Rial joined the University of Arizona from the University of Texas, where she was the John Seeley Distinguished Chair in Clinical Research and Director of the Center for Comparative Effectiveness and Outcomes. She is a professor in the Division of Surgical Oncology and is internationally known for her work on comparative effectiveness. So research comparing different treatments to understand the right treatment for the right patient in the right setting, patient-centered cancer and general surgery outcomes. She is a co-author of more than 120 peer-reviewed publications and 20 book chapters. She serves on the editorial boards for the Annals of Surgery, the Journal of GI Surgery, and Surgery. In addition, she is a certified professional leadership and life coach with a coaching company called Tailor Your Success. Dr. Rial.
Thank you. So these are my disclosures. Today, I'm going to talk about well-being, and investing in our own well-being is really an investment in our patients, our colleagues, our organization, our family, and our friends. For many of us, the time and energy that we dedicate because of the time and energy that we dedicate to our careers, our identity is often wrapped up in being a surgeon. But there's so much more that makes me who I am. So we all have lives outside the operating room in the hospital, and we have to take care of all of these parts of ourselves to thrive. This past year has been a time of significant reflection for me, and today I'm going to talk a lot about personal resiliency, well-being, and prioritizing ourselves, as I've come to appreciate that these things are essential for career longevity and for fulfillment in our crazy world. And physician well-being is really essential to high-quality healthcare. And it extends far beyond the absence of burnout. This is about the whole person. It's about our physical health, our emotional health, and our social support. And I would argue that if we are conflicted, struggling, or feeling powerless in any aspect of our lives, it impacts our performance in other areas, and it keeps us from realizing our full potential. And as surgeons, we are elite athletes. So think of the ways that we're similar to people like Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky or Serena Williams or Peyton Manning. We have a very specific and highly developed skill set that we hone over years of practice. We have to continually learn and expand our limits to stay in the game. And in addition, we have to perform under conditions of intense pressure. Also in our world, numbers drive everything, our RVUs, our operative times, you name it. And often last year's records become this year's baseline. And we are required to have moment-to-moment laser focus to excel at what we do. And when we don't, our patients, our families, and our colleagues may suffer. And really taking care of ourselves is a major part of taking care of business. So if our bodies and our minds are sick, then we're out of the game and we actually can't take care of anyone. And so I like to think that like elite athletes, to perform at our best, we need to fuel our bodies appropriately. We need to train continually and to hone our skills. We need to rest and recover, which I haven't found the solution to yet. We need to sharpen our mental game. And I'm going to touch on all aspects of this, and I'll start just briefly with our physical health. So my patients often ask me what they can eat after a Whipple, and I tell my patients that life is too short to never eat ice cream and to eat the things that you want. So I really divide my world into my need foods. So these are the things that I need to fuel my body, that allow me to operate all day or to run a half marathon. And then my want foods. These meet my psychological, my social, and my emotional needs. In general, I don't eliminate any food groups. I follow an 80-20 rule. So 80% of my diet is from these need foods, 20% is from my want foods. And you can do that however you want. You can have those want foods once a week. You can have them once a day. You can have them in small amounts with every meal. But really, whatever meets those psychological, social, and emotional needs. But more important than what we eat, I think, is that over the course of our regular day, our supply often does not meet our demand. So this is my typical OR day, which is very different than what a clinic or an administrative day would look like. But on an OR day, I wake up at 4 a.m. and I exercise. And basically, since it's the middle of the night, I don't eat before I exercise. So right off the bat, my demand does not meet my supply. And I take a shower and I gobble down breakfast on my way to work, often not the best choice at breakfast. And then I start in the OR. And if I do a long case, I can go 4 to 6 hours before I eat again. And my mental and physical demand is high, but my supply is low. Then when I get out of the OR, I eat too much. I often don't make the best choices because I'm cranky. And I finish my work or email and notes, and then I drive home and I eat a big dinner, after which I either sit and I answer my email or I watch TV or hang out with the puppies. And I want a snack, but I just ate a big dinner. And then I go to bed on a pretty full stomach. I know it's a pretty exciting life. But think about ways just with small changes in your day-to-day where you can create a more steady state of supply and demand. So I think this awareness and these small changes make a big difference in your overall energy. So for example, when I wake up at 4 a.m, I add a cup of applesauce or a few crackers before I run, and I work out better. I still eat on my way to work, but I try to eat something that has protein, carbs, fat in my meal that has a decent glycemic index so that when I'm doing a Whipple, I'm not cranky by 10 a.m. Now, if I'm doing a case like a Whipple, I'll scrub out after I take the tumor out. just for 5 or 10 minutes before I reconstruct and eat a quick balanced snack, which helps me focus, not get frustrated. It helps me teach better. I'm also less hungry when I finish. So I eat smaller amounts. I make better choices. I plan dinner. I only need a snack if I walk or play with the dogs, and I'll skip it if I go to bed early. But I try to match that supply and demand throughout the day, because when supply exceeds demand, we're lethargic. When demand exceeds supply, we're hangry, and a lot of other symptoms. And I think a lot about this. I always have snacks available. I also think about movement. So I try not to go more than 2 hours without moving. And that sounds silly, but in the OR, this can actually be really hard to remember because we're focused on what we're doing. But I've come to taking what I call micro breaks in the operating room. So I just step away from the table. I stand up straight. I tighten my core muscles. I stretch. I flex my knees. On a day when I'm sitting in meetings all day or writing, I set alarms for small breaks. I get up, I walk around, I go up and down the stairs a few times. I use my stand-up desk. I sit on a balance ball, all things that sort of engage me and keep me moving strategically. And then exercise is essential. But when we think of exercise, this doesn't need to be hours of exercise every day. This can be strategically worked into our daily routines. And regular exercise in almost any form can make a big difference in our physical and mental health. I also try to remember that some is better than none. So this is something that I've worked to really change my mentality on, because myself included, I work with many surgeons who have this all or nothing mentality. I used to schedule my workouts weeks in advance. And if I planned to run for 90 minutes and then life got in my way, it was like pass fail. If I only had time for 30 minutes, I think, well, why bother? But 30 minutes is better than nothing at all. 10 minutes is better than nothing at all. And so I realized some is better than none, that it's the quality of the workout and not necessarily the quantity. I try to do things that get maximum improvement in minimal time. Try to make exercise easy and fun, and I work it into my daily life. So I take the stairs at work instead of the elevator. I did this the other day, but on my average day, if I take the stairs instead of the elevator, I do on average 70 flights of stairs. I walk fast from my office to the operating room. I take small exercise breaks. If you exercise just 10 minutes 3 times a day, it's as good as 30 minutes once a day. I also have like resistance bands that you can just carry in your coat pocket. You can get a full body workout in 10 to 15 minutes. In a quarter of the time it takes them to turn over the room between your cases. So work this into your daily routine. It doesn't have to be a big production and hours of exercise every day. So we ask ourselves, well, how do we work this in? And I used to think that I couldn't do all the things I wanted to do, but I can. I just can't do them all now. So I find myself often saying things like, I don't have time. And when I do, I stop myself. And instead, I realize that I'm simply not making it a priority. Then I ask myself if that feels right. Now, if it's truly not a priority, that's fine. And I can just set it down and stop perseverating on it. But if it is a priority, then how do I realign the time and the energy I'm spending to dedicate to that? And as we move through our lives and we move through our careers, our priorities change. So sometimes those changes are abrupt. You get married, COVID hits, you get ill, you become a parent, and you're forced to realign the time and energy that you're spending with those new priorities. But more often, those changes in your priorities are insidious. They're not even in your conscious awareness. And sometimes we just settle for good enough in many areas of our lives. And our inertia in that direction is strong, and it's easier to continue that way and settle rather than to change. And so when I coach clients, I often ask, where in your life are you settling for good enough? And these are the areas that we work on. My point is that your priorities are going to continually change over time, and that's okay. But the point is you need to be aware of both those subtle and acute shifts in these priorities, and you need to continually reassess your priorities and make the changes you need to realign those priorities with the time and energy that you're spending. So this is Winston. We got Winston in May of 2018, and Winston is a 4-year-old incredibly spoiled golden doodle. You get one soul dog in every life, and Winston is mine. And I've learned so many lessons from Winston. But one of the things I love most about Winston is his ability to live in the moment. In June of 2019, Charlie and I took a 2-week trip to South Africa. And during this time, we took Winston to the Tucson Adventure Dog Ranch. You can't make this stuff up, but these are photos of Winston at the dog ranch. It's like dog camp. So they go off leash hiking and they go swimming and they play ball and they play on agility equipment. And at the end of every day, they send me hundreds of pictures of Winston playing with his dog friends. And as we were coming back from Africa, I said to Charlie, I wonder if Winston's going to be sad to leave the dog ranch. And I quickly realized he's not sad. Winston wakes up every morning, happy to be at the dog ranch, doing what he's doing there. And then when we pick him up, he's like so excited to see us that his whole body is wagging. But he doesn't anticipate, he doesn't regret. He just lives in the moment. He doesn't wonder when he's going to come back. And of course, this is easier for Winston than it is for me because this is his calendar compared to mine. But there are so many things in academic medicine in our world that block our ability to live in the present. So we are always worried about what else we have to do. So I'm in the OR and I'm worried about being late to a meeting. I'm in a meeting and I'm worried about a sick patient. I'm with a sick patient and I'm guilty that I'm late to meet Charlie. I used to be really proud of my ability to multitask, but I've actually learned that when I do, nothing actually gets the attention that it needs. I started practicing mindfulness and meditation to allow me to focus on what I'm doing while I'm doing it. In the beginning, I was amazed at how hard it is for me to quiet my mind for even 10 minutes. I actually do what I consider a lot of active meditation. So if I'm out running, I focus on my footsteps or the cactuses and I let my thoughts pass without chasing them. When I'm having dinner with Charlie, I don't answer emails and text messages on my phone. When I eat, I just stop and I taste my food, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes. I don't do something else. If I walk to the OR, I look at the people around me and I smile and I say hello. And these things don't add time to my day, but they add space. And they actually allow me to focus on what I'm doing when I'm doing it and to be more effective. I also think a lot about maintaining empathy. So we all went to medical school on some level to help people, but we give and give and give, and we don't take care of ourselves. And when we do that, we get compassion fatigue and we can't take care of anyone. And there's so many things in our day-to-day lives that block our empathy. So I'm sure many of you have seen the Cleveland Clinic video on empathy, but if you didn't, you should watch it. But it basically shows people coming in and out of the Cleveland Clinic on a normal day, and it has these captions over their head like, the tumor's malignant, the tumor's benign, their 19-year-old son's on life support, just got engaged. And it basically just shows you the things that people are dealing with that you don't see every day. And it's quite moving. The first time I watched the video, I was really moved. And about 10 minutes later, I was rushing out of the hospital. I was a little late, like I always am. And there was a woman in the lobby who was clearly lost. And on another day, in my usual rush, I would have thought, I don't have time, and figured someone else would help her find her way. But I just watched the video, so I stopped and I helped her find her way to the ICU, which took all of about 3 minutes. And as I dropped her off in the ICU, she turned to me and she said, my best friend just overdosed. Like she said that thing in the video, and I would have missed that connection had I not taken that time to stop. Winston always reminds me of this because he models empathy in a way that humans can't. So when I'm sad, he knows. He comes and he lays his head in my lap and he just sits and absorbs my sadness with me. He doesn't ask for anything. He doesn't minimize it. He doesn't tell me it'll be okay. He doesn't tell me about a time he had it worse. He just sits with me and provides that comfort of knowing I'm not alone. And it also tells me that you don't have to experience what someone else has experienced to have that empathy. You only need to be able to connect with those emotions. In his book, The Happiness Advantage, Sean Aker points out that our formula for success is backwards. So we're taught from a young age that if we work hard, we'll succeed, and then we'll be happy. And we do work hard, and we do succeed, but we actually never get to happy. Because once we achieve that goal, we change it. So we get into medical school and then we want to be AOA. We finish medical school, we want the best residency. We work hard in our faculty position so we could be promoted. We just continually set that bar higher. We create a new goal and we never get to happy. We push happiness over what he refers to as the cognitive horizon. And so I would encourage you to celebrate your accomplishments and, more importantly, to internalize them. Many of us suffer from imposter syndrome in one form or another, and we internalize every mistake and every bit of criticism, but we're really quick to gloss over our accomplishments and the compliments that people give us. So celebrate those accomplishments and internalize them. Sean Aker also talks about retraining our brains to focus on the positive. When we're residents, we're only told when we're doing things wrong, but very rarely do we get that positive reinforcement. Not every day is good, but good things happen every day. And so he talks about keeping a gratitude journal that can help you focus on those little good things that happen every day that otherwise get lost in the noise of our day-to-day lives. So that beautiful sunset, puppy kisses, ice cream, whatever. He also talks about random or intentional acts of kindness. So I try to practice both, but I've really been focused on intentional acts of kindness. So we are really quick to fire off an email when we're angry at somebody, but how often do we thank somebody who's been incredibly helpful? Every day I try to recognize when people help, when people are kind, what people are going through, and it makes a difference for both the giver and the receiver. I've also come to realize that I'm never going to be done with everything on my to-do list. So I'm going to die and there's still going to be things on the list, and I'm okay with that. Your days, like mine, I'm sure, are a house of cards. So if one thing goes wrong, if a patient gets sick, if your kid gets sick, the whole thing falls apart. And it's easy for me to come home at the end of the day and say to Charlie, I didn't get anything done. But that's not true. I may not have checked all the boxes on my list, but taking care of a sick patient or helping one of my colleagues in need is critically important. And so start focusing on what you did rather than what you didn't do. So I do an exercise when I get really bogged down for a few weeks, where every night before I go to bed, I just write down the things I accomplished instead of the things I didn't. And it really helps keep me focused on the positive and not the negative. And it's not enough to talk about this stuff. So you actually have to model these behaviors, and you actually have to create an environment that supports them. So when I came to Arizona, my goal was to create an intentional culture that supports the well-being of my residents, faculty, and staff. And every day I try to do that. In my opinion, if we get the culture right, the rest is easy. Work RVUs, compliance, quality, patient satisfaction, because engaged, healthy surgeons with discretional energy can do all of those things. And culture sets the tones for what's acceptable. Culture drives resident, faculty, and student staff behavior. And every day I try to model these things. And even if you're not in a position to change culture at a high level, you can change it one interaction at a time. The leader is the person in that interaction who has the greater influence. In July of 2016, we actually implemented a resident wellbeing and resiliency program in Arizona. And the program is based on a model called energy leadership, which basically provides residents tools for creating self-awareness and improving their emotional intelligence and helping them respond effectively to the stress that's inherent in our environment. After creating that foundation with the energy leadership model, we have monthly sessions that include team building, communication, work-life integration, goal setting, empathy, strategic diet and exercise, posture and ergonomics, stress reduction, mindfulness and meditation. And I believe that these skills, like tying knots or throwing sutures or deciding when to operate, can be taught and practiced. And I think they're essential to success in today's complex healthcare environment, and they're essential to career longevity. The program also encourages healthy behavior, work-life integration, and a sense of community. This year in our department, we ran the Tucson Gabe Zimmerman Triple Crown, which was a 5K in August, a 10K in September, and a half marathon in October. A lot of people did that to help support me, which was just a great experience. I recognize that not everybody thinks it's fun to run 13 miles. So we also have a variety of other activities that engage diverse audiences, including families. So these are just some of them: a costume party. We have a regular book club. We have open discussions about diversity and inclusion. We do yoga and brunch, dinners, hockey games, and many other activities. So I just have a few parting words of wisdom or things to think about. So take the time to do the things that bring you peace and joy, even if only for a few minutes every day. Some other speakers touch on this, but when I work with surgeons who are burned out, they often can't even remember what these things are. So these are just a few of the things that bring me peace and joy and feed different parts of me. Running clears my mind. Sitting outside on my patio at sunset with Charlie and the dogs, that's sunset from my patio, brings me peace. I started boxing in January, and boxing makes me feel strong. I recently had Winston certified to be a therapy dog, and I started bringing him to the hospital and to different places, and it really brings me incredible joy to see the joy that it brings others. Our staff and doctors who've just been so overworked with the COVID pandemic, our patients who've been alone, and actually Winston himself, because he just loves attention, and it really feeds my need for connection to others. So do the things that bring you joy and remember what they are. In June of 2013, I was in the elevator. This is when I was still at UTMB, and the chief resident in medicine got on the 6th floor. I hadn't known him since he was a medical student. And, I said hello and I asked him how he was. And to this day, I remember his response. He's like, "Oh, I'm good." He's like, "I can see the finish line." And I didn't have the heart to tell him that there is no finish line. So the journey is the destination, and the journey has to feel the way you want that finish line to feel. As I navigate a lot of challenges in my own life now, I know I'm successful when I'm enjoying that journey, and when I'm creating an environment that allows the people around me to do the same. And when I'm not, I kind of continually step back, I reevaluate, I realign my priorities with my values. But don't be too focused on the finish line that you forget to enjoy the journey. And with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Riel. That was fantastic. We are organizing a wellness session for our residents, and I think you'll be happy to hear we have therapy dogs coming. So it sounds like that will probably be the best part of the day. So.
Yeah. I bring Winston in a heartbeat. He loves it.
I'm really excited about that. So we are actually running over our time. I do want to be respectful of the moderators. So I think that we are going to go ahead and conclude. But this webinar will be posted online, and it will also be turned out as a podcast on SSAT Soundbite. So thank you all very much. I had some very enlightening talks today, and I think that this has given me some directions for professional development, and I hope that it will for others as well.
Yes, thank you all very much for participating.
Thank you for having us.
Agreed. Thank you. Great panel.
Bye-bye.